I really want to talk about this mess about comic creators. Uh, I don't know, man. It's like, let's just say you're a fan of the Dilbert, right? And you don't want to have to go onto some dark web internet site. I gotta hit the dark web in order to get my Dilberts now. Uh, that sucks, you know. And not only that, but maybe he said something that doesn't jive with you, and you're just like, I can't really continue reading this fucking shit anymore. And bravo to the newspapers. Oh, about censorship, consequences. I don't care anymore. Stop saying stupid things. Start loving your customers and start realizing that there's people out there that are doing the work for you. When you shoot them in the foot with your stupid tactics and aggravating people, it ain't doing anybody any good. And you know what? It's bad for you. Do you really feel that way? And if you do, I talk about this a lot. Maybe not in this show, but maybe more in this store. But when I was a kid growing up, I had heard all the stories about the most cantankerous person on the comic book scene, John Byrne. And maybe people in the chat have, or in comments after the fact, have experienced John Byrne before. But he famously wouldn't draw pictures, and I don't know if they were charging back then because not everybody would. It was a different time. But John Byrne didn't want to ever draw Wolverine again. I think he kind of didn't like Wolverine a whole lot, or he didn't like what Wolverine became. And Wolverine definitely changed. When the masses started really liking him, he had to become a little bit more toned down. He didn't have his berserker rages as much. He wasn't killing fools as much. He became fatherly to the point where he actually had cloned kids that even have taken his name. So, Wolverine has changed. He's been a school marm. He fought against Cyclops because he didn't think kids should be, doing the things that the X-Men were having them do. And it's ridiculous. Mutants are being ganged up on all the time and hunted down to maybe extinction. And Cyclops is getting them to defend and not doing anything different than Charles Xavier. Well, hopefully a little bit better than Charles Xavier, because that's always been the interplay between Cyclops and Charles. One's of a father figure, and then the other one's trying to continue with this father figure's message, but also realizing that not everything is, kosher with what Charles is freaking doing. And there have been a lot more stories, probably starting with Joss Whedon's Astonishing X-Men, that would suggest that Charles is a dick. But of course, Kitty Pryde said that famously at one time also. Maybe not the dick part. That's left for movies. But John Byrne wouldn't draw Wolverine. And recently, and this was years ago now, there was a convention and he was signing for IDW. And he was doing Star Trek comic books for IDW. And he had worked for IDW doing Highways and something else. So maybe some Next Men or something. So those were the things that he was willing to sign. But don't you goddamn bring your X-Men or your Fantastic Four or your Alpha Flight or anything like that. I think he relinquished a little, but he also had, hey, guys, realize that these are the guys that are bringing me here. These are the things I'm repping. At least, in the very least, he's trying to sell the things that that company is trying to, sell to us, to get us to buy. But at the same time, maybe you could have had a limit, just one thing only. Maybe one X, one Alpha, one Fantastic only. And if you can figure out what my favorite Marvel team up is, maybe then, or Champions or whatever. I don't know. People are hounds out there trying to make money on these fools. Stan Lee, Remember when that happened, and his kids and all these people were trotting him out there? They actually had a handler that was there to hold his hand so that he could sign, you know? Fantinium will tell you about Uhura. Is it is Nichelle Nichols? And they basically did the same thing. I heard from a guy that gets signatures for people and then has comics pressed by people, and then he sends it out to CGC. I get good grades sometimes. And he had William Shatner sign some Star Treks. And supposedly there was a handler helping him out with it also. He's an old man. He's in his 90s. His birthday was last week, a day before mine. Thank you for the birthday wishes. For all of you that were out there and knew. um, yeah, he's an old man. We're old men. But comic book people that aren't old are out there, and they are saying some things that are they're getting people upset. And we already talked about the psychos out there, the conservatives. We don't have to name every single one. I'm sure there's people in the chat that know people. But seriously, like when it hits like Elizabeth Breitweiser, who by all accounts just seems like a cool enough person. She votes a certain way, votes a certain way her husband does. Something I've seen almost all my life, these are things that happen. I wonder why. But she's a colorist. I mean, she's a good colorist by all accounts. It doesn't seem like she's getting a whole lot of work, maybe necessarily. Maybe she's got work that she's doing right now. But I remember there was a lot of people, saying that, she's persona non grata when it comes to like the Ed Brubaker books. And I mean, all right, fine, that's cool. I mean, it's image, you get to decide who works for you. But, it's just, it's sometimes like, kind of like I didn't know back in the day, like that was the rumor about John Byrne. I never saw it or heard a ton of people tell me about that. Now that there's social media, obviously, and the internet and whatnot, you find out about these things a whole lot more. We've got before you had to have a big old camera in order to record something that was going on, and now I have a phone that's way better than any of that and records longer probably, and better picture, better sound pickup. It's just it's amazing the technology and how it's progressed, and as a result people are not always minding their P's and Q's. All right, so let me get these pictures up here. Oh, I have them already. All right. Maybe just possibly one of these are runners up, okay? Maybe just possibly Jerry Ordway was the person, maybe one of the worst things that a comic book creator ever said. Unfortunately, to say this would also have to mean that I would have to agree or disagree with it, with my statement, my whole philosophy right now, that comic creators, this guy, that he is one of the persons that stuck his foot in his mouth when he suggested that Superman should die. But on a whole, it sold very well, and Superman sold for a long time, and people paid attention for it a lot longer, in higher numbers than had been in a very long time. But the reality is I can get any comic book buy that comes through my door might possibly have the comics that preceded these issues, where Superman dies, the issue where Superman dies in a bag, out of a bag, with a bag, all the accoutrement to come with it, gimmick upon gimmick upon gimmick in this one issue. It was a success. It was a super success. But we look at the way comics are right now with the multiple covers, That still they're doing ones that are in bags and things like that. And maybe this is, might be, along with, some people say, like, Dark Knight Returns and Watchmen really, although achievements of comic book, lore didn't necessarily help with the the overallness of it. Okay, let's see. Next up, we have a person who most people that know about comic book people that, rankle people. We've got Dan Slott. Yeah. Just recently, he had to respond to Elon Musk. I understand there's a lot of people that have a boner to hate on Elon Musk. I totally understand. I sympathize with you. I think he does some things that are cool, and he says and does a lot of things that aren't very cool. One of them, it possibly is something I'm not too fond of, but I really don't give a shit also. He's changing his whole check verification thing. You have to pay for it. This isn't really the worst thing I've ever heard a person say. But Dan Slott's like, I was verified during a time when I had multiple people pretending to be me online. Everybody knows that Dan Slott are those other people. He does multiple accounts. He's been caught before. And I'm sure there's been other people that make fun of it because, they'll put the Dan Slott, and it might have like there'll be capital letters or something like that. And those are parody accounts or people making fun of him and stuff like that. It happens when you're a prick. And I like Dan Slott, Spider-Man, just to let everybody know. He never did me any wrong as far as that's concerned. He's all, I have 160K followers, provide free content, and bring traffic here. I will no longer do that without verification. Like anybody cares about verification, you know what I mean? I mean, stop being like a little baby and talking about stuff like that. It's just, eh. All right, let's see. And then anything he says, I would recommend. Any recent creator, 2011, maybe a little bit after, but definitely when my store was beginning and we were selling crazy awesome stuff. If this is like the death of Superman, and I'm not saying that this aspect of, well, anyway, I'm gonna say let's make him gay. That's what I'm saying. Anybody now saying that. It wasn't really all that great when Scott Lobdell did it in a flagging Alpha Flight title and they made North Star gay. But people freaking paid attention, and then Alpha Flight got canceled. But North Star's been like one of the long-standing gay characters, and rather than do something with him, rather than write really good stories that you have for him, a lot of what happens is they say, oh, this is a character that can be gay or bisexual or changed. Again, if it's a natural progression in a story, I was thinking of one when I was on Thinking Critical about how they could have done Robin, Tim Drake, coming out as bisexual. And he could have had this will he, won't they kind of situation with Stephanie and the duties with now. And it could have been the super crazy love triangle that was Preacher-esque, not as a horrible or hateful or hurtful towards other people, but one where you really are steeped in the character, you really care about all the characters and how they're going to come out of this. And that could have also been within the story of a superhero comic book. So like it's not necessarily the fact that the character is gay, but when a guy like Brian Michael Bendis comes out and just because of Jean Grey mind melding or whatever gayness into Bobby, it doesn't mean he necessarily is. It also doesn't mean that his first freaking thing he's going to do is all of it all at once immediately. Oh, the floodgates are open. It's not always how it works. A person that's shy is still shy. A person that's hesitant is still hesitant. They're not all of a sudden wearing shorts like they're in freaking Reno 911. You know what I mean? These are things I can't stand when people in social media plug their books saying something is metal, heavy metal, something is punk rock, punk, this is punk, something is a banger. All these words, it used to be surreal in the early 2000s. These are catchwords that are supposed to make me think of something that it isn't really. And if you have to use a descriptor like that, it almost always is not that thing. And I can't stand it. I think these are things that hurt. Just tell me the freaking story you're trying to tell me. You know what I mean? Don't make it long. Get to the point. And comics have gotten away from that. All right, here's the three. Okay, this is most recently, today. Matthew Rosenberg, who writes Wildcats. He's not using his platform to let people know about the comic book that he's doing. He's not letting people know about a store that he lives by or a store that he likes that's carrying a book that he's writing. He is talking about Twitter. And I think when he's saying the algorithm, he's talking about the Elon Musk thing. And he's trying to drive traffic to Substack, to where his newsletter is. And he's doing it in a thread so that he and everyone that's out there can put names of people that have newsletters that are out there. Not necessarily a horrible thing, okay? But seriously, this was a moment in the Republican race. Hey, Republicans out there, remember when you hated Donald Trump? Hey, Donald Trump fans out there, remember when this happened and Jeb Bush said, please clap because he said something that needed an applause? This is not a good thing. This picture correlates with something that is not helping the people that are picking up the comics that are selling things in their stores. This is ridiculous. I don't care about frickin' Hickman's Substack account for books that may or may not come out in hardcover form. That does me no good anymore when he's not doing comics for, for Marvel, for DC, for his Image stuff. Oh, it's eventually going to come out, but everybody that reads Hickman is going to get that now, or the diehards that read Hickman are going to do that now. I know there's people out there, and then this kind of plays in with this newsletter bit. The Kickstarter, the now Zoop, the Indiegogo, the crowd-funded campaigns to put comic books in people's hands, foregoing comic book stores, people that are willing to spend 5, 10, 25, sometimes more, depending on what you get with the comic book. I've done it. It's I mean, it's cool. If I have time, I'm gonna talk about a comic that we're gonna be getting in the store. I've got some pictures of some of it. But this is driving traffic away from comic stores, driving traffic away from the comic books that you're working on. Look, you don't have to go out and tell anybody anything. There you go. You go to a convention, let a journalist tell people what you said. Maybe the people that want to know something from you, maybe you do a book and it has your sensibilities, but you weren't able to put your sensibilities on Wildcats, Matthew Rosenberg. But you are able to on a smaller title. But you want that smaller title to be big because, I'm working on Wildcats, I'm working at DC. And then you let everybody know how you are. I have full access to you, whether it's Twitter. Oh, that's gone, but at least I subscribe to your newsletter. Oh, I've got your Patreon where I can pay money and get little things that you're doing. By the way, Fantastic Comics has a Patreon. We'll get to that later. These are all things that are driving money away from the people that would purchase your stuff in comic book stores. It's directing people to read stuff that isn't the comic books that are in comic book stores. And it's just giving free content and free media out there. And if you're charging for it, Three Worlds, Hickman's, maybe not the newsletter, but all the other stuff that comes with it, you have to subscribe to it. You have to pay money for it. That art isn't free. You got to make it. You got to pay people. Not my favorite tactic. That's what I'm saying right there. It's not my favorite tactic. Okay. This one happened a while ago, and it's famous on the internet of people that hate on people. The thing I want to let people know right up front, when I was on Shattuck, and it was in the early 2011s, 2012s, whatever it was, this person's book sold well for me. We had book club. People were fans. They got tattoos. It was quite the scene. So in no way am I denigrating this person's efforts. What I am denigrating is what they say in this interview that got plastered, and whether or not it's taken out of context, this is what people remember.
And if you don't like my politics, don't buy my book.
That's Kelly Sue DeConnick. And when you tell people not to buy your books, you're supposed to tell people to buy your books. To buy your books. Don't say it's about my politics. Say it's about the struggle for this and this and this. This is the main character is this kind of person that is blah, 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 blah. Something that a person can relate to. If it's science fiction based, if it's horror based, let people know it's that. It's a Western. It's a horror Western, pretty deadly. It's got beautiful art by Emma Rios, and you don't have to let people know that you don't want them to buy the book. It's kind of like how the Substack bit is. It's kind of like the crowdfunding. Oh, and by the way, we're putting this book out. Jimmy Palmiotti, who does a lot of stuff for DC and Marvel, or has in the past. And maybe this is the only refuge they have because nobody wants old people to work in comics anymore. Does a lot of Kickstart type stuff. But instead of, working for another company, I mean, it is good to own your own thing, but you're going to be paying more money more often than not. And it doesn't get distributed, and not as many people find out about it. Some say that the comic book store is an archaic model and it's unimportant. I say if you want to buy cheap stuff from Amazon and expect it to be cheap when there aren't any comic stores anymore, you're wrong. If there's only one comic store that has all of the back issues, you're going to be paying more. If there's only one grading company out there, you're going to be paying whatever grades they're giving, or whatever it costs for them to do it. None of this is a good idea, and I don't recommend it. And lastly, this is the tweet that sent me off yesterday. Ed Piskor. This isn't necessarily Ed Piskor being a scumbag. I said it's the scummiest thing comics creators can say to comic stores. He's talking about his hip hop family tree graphic novel collection that's going to have all of it in one big book, including extra pages that you didn't buy when you bought the issues, that you couldn't buy when you got the issues, that you couldn't buy when you got the oversized treasury size graphic novels. And he wants to let everybody know out there it's orderable on Amazon. This isn't in stores right now. Everybody knows about Amazon. No fucking person needs to be told to go to goddamn Amazon. It's bad enough I had our freaking government, and everybody knows this that pays attention. Any small store, Any store you had to go to and weren't allowed to go to while we were shut down was dominated by Amazon. Dominated to the point where all sorts of shit was going down, right? They don't need any more freaking help. And they definitely don't need help from freaking comic book creators out there saying, go to there instead of the comic store. I actually have people that tell me they want to come to my store rather than order from Amazon or go to Barnes and Noble or whatever the hell it is. For some people, Barnes and Noble is the local comic book store or whatever it may be. And, I understand, when there's nothing of that ilk out there, that's how you've got to order things. But everybody knows about it by now. They were given the biggest handout they could have ever been given. Everybody rails against the guy on Twitter, but nobody talks shit about Bezos. You know what I mean? Why don't they ever talk smack about him? He's not like a philanthropist, is he? He's not like the one in Washington, right? And I mean, that guy's not even married to the woman that's forced him to do it. So is he even more anymore? Oh, sure, I'm sure he's got his hands and stuff. Still, Amazon doesn't need your freaking help. It's where I can buy batteries now. There's no reason. Where's the Radio Shack? Where's the local store that isn't a 7-Eleven? Seriously. Everything's a freaking corporation. Everything's a conglomerate. The only thing that isn't is the freaking comic store. And we have to sell it at full freaking price. There was a time when paperbacks, you could get Game of Thrones, the first Song of Ice and Fire. You get it for $6.99 on Amazon. Sure, you get that from a seller on Amazon. But if you're buying it from Amazon, it's $10 now. There are no more bookstores other than Barnes and Noble. And although they're selling manga, they're actually branching out their graphic novel section so they can have more manga. You know who's not going to have it on their freaking shelves? Barnes and Noble. They don't care. Maybe one copy. They'll shove it where all the other shit is that doesn't sell because it's not manga. You need someone to say, hey, you got to read this. You like hip hop. You like cool representations of all your black hip hop favorites. You like to know the story about the East and the West, the hip hop rivalries. You don't get that on Amazon. Oh, you bought a Tupac biography. Maybe you'll be recommended the Hip Hop Family Tree. Oh, you bought Hulk Grand Design. Maybe you'll be recommended Hip Hop Family Tree. This thing's like $75. When I have to count in my shipping, I barely make any money on stuff that I get from Diamond. Fantagraphics is a company I get from Diamond. And this sucks. So there you go. This is not for clout. I'm not punching up so that I could, get anything. This is how I feel. Let's go to comments.